Armen Levack, 1045 The Team, 1045theteam.com. On the phone, we needed a little more insight about the Toronto Blue Jays entering this weekend 3-game series, Yankees, Blue Jays. So go straight to the Blue Jays' mouth. From the Toronto Star, Brendan Kennedy joins us. Brendan, you are with this team, the Toronto Blue Jays, day in, day out. When you look at this squad, do you say to yourself, the American League East is over and the Blue Jays have won it?
Well, I wouldn't go that far yet, but they went from basically before the trade deadline, they were a flawed team with a very, very good offense. And basically in a matter of 3 days, Alex Anthopoulos kind of plugged all the team's holes, at least the most glaring ones. The bullpen was a big weakness at the start of the year. Now it's much, much stronger. It may even be a strength at this point. And, the Jays clearly lacked a front of the rotation starter. And so Anthopoulos went out and got arguably the best one out there in David Price. They also picked up some smaller pieces like Ben Revere, who kind of is filled in what was a question mark in left field. And there's also been some internal improvements in terms of the rotation. That was a big weakness for the first half of the year, but no team really has pitched better since the All-Star break. The Jays, both the starters and their bullpen, have the best ERA in the American League since the All-Star break. So, you take all that and you add it to what was already the highest scoring offense in the majors, and now it's just a far, far more complete team.
Oh, well, as a born and bred Yankee fan, and you're home for New York sports and the New York Yankees, 1045 The Team, you're breaking my heart, but I don't know if I disagree with you. Now, in Toronto this weekend, what's the vibe of the fans? What kind of influence do you think the fans will have on the series this weekend?
This entire series has been sold out now for, I think, about 2 weeks. Since the Troy Tulowitzki trade, I think the Jays have sold an additional 500,000 tickets for the rest of the year, something crazy like that. So excitement is really, it's kind of hard to overstate. It's really at as high as it's been since the World Series glory years, like 1992-93. Right now, the Jays have the longest postseason drought in professional sports. So you can kind of imagine how desperate Jays fans are to cheer a winner. They're already in kind of pennant race mode, and the last few games, there's been almost a playoff-like atmosphere. There's 40,000 people there on Tuesday night to face against the last place Rays, which is, it's sort of unheard of for a Tuesday night game against a team that doesn't typically draw too well in Toronto to have that many. So the excitement really is at an all-time high, since they were setting attendance records in the early 90s. In terms of what kind of effect they will have, the players have talked about how, it does give them an emotional boost. And if you looked at David Price's his debut in Toronto, he described, and maybe he was just playing to his new hosts, but, he said it was the best atmosphere he'd ever pitched in. And he said he was including playoff games and pitching at Fenway and stuff like that. So that was some pretty high praise. It was his first game in Toronto, so, he may have been just kind of sucking up to his new crowd, but if you looked at his velocity, it was actually a couple ticks higher than it normally is, which some people have attributed to the adrenaline boost, the emotional boost from the crowd. So there could be an actual tangible effect to it, but it'll definitely be loud. At the same time, whenever the Yankees are in town, there's always a big contingent of Yankees fans, people who come across the border. So it should be a lively crowd, if nothing else.
Brendan Kennedy of the Toronto Star. You can follow him on Twitter at @BKennedyStar. Brendan, when you talk about the fans, when you talk about the moves at the deadline and the way Toronto has just tracked down the Yankees, do you get the feeling of a brewing rivalry?
Totally. I think that there is this, I think anytime a team's winning, they develop a sort of swagger that can be annoying to any other team. And we saw it with the Jays and Royals. A little earlier this month, there were some not quite brawls, but there were some dust-ups. There was benches were cleared a couple times. There was, a bunch of buzz pitches and that kind of thing. And I think anytime the games become more emotional, anytime the games become more meaningful, I think there's the possibility that, rivalry ensues. I think what happens this weekend will tell a lot for, the next two series that they play against each other in September.
Brendan Kennedy of the Toronto Star joining us right here. Armen Levack, 104.5 The Team, 104.5theteam.com. When you look at this Jays team, when you hear these guys talking, is there any fear of the Yankees at all? Is there any aspect of New York Yankees that the Blue Jays look at right now and go, I don't want that to happen?
At this point, no. But, I know that'll change. Like when a team's in the middle of a winning streak, especially a long one like this one, it's kind of hard to see their flaws. It's hard to see their weaknesses. I spoke to Russell Martin just a couple days ago, and he was saying, we feel like we don't have any weaknesses. He feels that the team's weaknesses were addressed at the deadline, and now they feel flawless. I'm sure that'll change. But, Mark Burley just a few days ago was saying, right now our mindset is we come into the clubhouse and we're thinking, whose butt are we going to kick today? So I was kind of startled by how frank he was saying that, but that's what he said the mood is. So, the team's really flying high right now. Like I said, that these winning streaks don't last forever. That'll change. But right now, they feel like they can beat anybody. If there's any weakness really on the Jays team right now, it's like lack of depth in certain positions. For instance, like if Josh Donaldson were to get injured, they don't really have anybody who can take over at third base and even be kind of replacement level or something approaching league average. That would be a major blow. But I think, staying healthy is going to be their biggest challenge the rest of the way.
When you look at this team pre-trade deadline, post-trade deadline, how big of a difference has Troy Tulowitzki made, in this winning streak? Does this happen without him? Has he brought a more than a bat to this team?
Definitely, yeah. He actually hasn't hit terribly well. He had a great debut. He homered and had 2 doubles in his debut, but he hasn't hit that well since then. But at the same time, they have yet to lose with him in the starting lineup. So he's definitely, I would say, shored up the defense at shortstop. Jose Reyes, as great as he was as a leadoff hitter and getting on base, and he was an above-average offensive shortstop, he'd become an increasingly problematic defensive shortstop. And Troy Tulowitzki has shored the team up in that regard. At this point in his career, he's going to make too many highlight reel plays, but he makes all the ones he's supposed to, and he's very solid there. There's an element to this lineup where, I think a lot of people thought it was strange that he's leading off rather than hitting in the middle of the order. But I think, you can tell the effect that it has on Josh Donaldson, who hits in the 2-hole, and Jose Bautista, who hits behind him. There's just right from the first thing, I feel like, even if the opposing pitcher, is able to get the first 3 outs, they're very stressful at bat, having to face Tulowitzki, Donaldson, Bautista, right off the hop. So I think, if nothing else, even when he hasn't been hitting, he's still having good at bats. He's still getting on base. He's still drawing his walks. And I think that it's opening things up for Donaldson, who's just had an incredible 2 weeks since Tulowitzki arrived.
Brendan Kennedy of the Toronto Star. Follow him on Twitter at @BKennedyStar. All right, so playoff atmosphere on August 14th in Toronto tonight. How do you see this 3-game series playing out?
I'm terrible at predictions, and I find, covering this team the last few years, especially the way Alex Anthopoulos works, I've come to expect the unexpected. So I tend to not make predictions, but Price has been so good lately. I would expect him to be more of the same today. After that, I don't know. I feel like it's not going to be like when they went in New York, and I don't think there's going to be a sweep. I think the Yankees are going to put an end to the winning streak. I wouldn't bank on the Yankees tonight just because Price is on the mound, but I think the next 2 games will be split.
Everything you want to know about the Toronto Blue Jays, you can find out on Twitter at @BKennedyStar. Toronto Star's very own Brendan Kennedy. Thank you so much for making the time for us today, man.
Yeah, take care.